Cyberpunk has bionic legs. From its troubled 2020 launch on PC and last generation far behind it, we've seen vast strides forward with a collection of updates that have improved and refined the experience. Now with the big 2.0 update, it does all of these things and expands it with the new Phantom Liberty DLC. Is this one coming in equally as hot? Now the engine updates are free across the game, however, they are current generation console and PC only, with last generation missing out on both. Now these have been delivered in tandem with this new DLC expansion that has more than a flavour of Snake Plissken's Escape from New York about it. With CDP giving us access to the updates early, we managed to test these across Series X, S and PC, but the PlayStation 5 version was not accessible ahead of us for launch, but we could test the updates via the base game. Now let's start with the numbers game. As before, we have dual modes on all three consoles with ray tracing and performance choices on PlayStation 5 and Series X, and quality and performance mode on Series S. Both deliver similar levels as before, using FSR2 that shipped in the 1.61 update earlier this year, and we see ray tracing mode target a counted high of 1440p, which is then reconstructed back to 3840 by 2160 via that FSR2 solution, with it dropping to a counted low of 1271p. It is often at 1440p though. Performance mode has had its ceiling reduced to 1800p as a reconstruction output, topping out at the same 2560 by 1440p base from my count, but bottoms out now at 1920 by 1080. In a variety of counts, both consoles change their base often, and from these the gap on paper does seem small, but that 30% gap in ceiling combined with lower base resolutions in the performance mode does take a stability hit in busy scenes. From a visual perspective, the ray tracing mode adds ray trace shadows, increased level of detail, pedestrians and slightly improved AO. Both modes rely on screen space reflections and shadows, which do help ground objects and self-shadowing, but the culling and draw off when occluded is quite obvious, more so in the performance mode. Now in many sections both modes look similar, but the ray trace mode has a resolution advantage, certainly with thin wires, foliage and small details looking significantly more stable over the performance mode, but the big boost of frame rates can be hard to ignore. Now since this new patch, level of detail has also been tweaked in performance mode over the previous version, with a reduction in some areas such as pedestrian count, and due to the increased AI, pathfinding and more, the CPU demands have increased, which is also reflected in that PC version. The Series S lacks ray tracing and makes do with the quality mode. This targets 1440p via FSR2, but it's often around 1920 by 1080 as the counted base high and a low of 1506 by 847. Similar to Series X and PlayStation 5, it appears to shift between PC equivalent of ultra quality and performance levels. The performance mode targets 60 FPS and now targets only 1080p via FSR2 reconstruction and scales down to a counted low of 645p, with it most often being around 720, the cost of 60 FPS. The visual delta between these modes is minor, effectively increased shadow cascade and resolution and filtering, slight increases in LOD and ambient occlusion, and anything related to resolution such as SSR and texture filtering. Even in side-by-side, the gap is relatively small, with the performance leap and the resolution increase being the biggest between performance and quality mode respectively. The image quality and shimmer in the performance mode can be very apparent at times due to the low resolution base it runs at, and FSR2 simply not being very successful at such a low pixel count. Quality mode is much better on this score, with it being around 1080p as a base. It is far more stable with sub-pixel elements of shimmer, moire patterns, etc. But it still suffers from heavy ghosting of the image sometimes that plagues all versions including PC, with that TAA pass being very aggressive in high contrast areas such as trailing on tarmac as you drive, and this still is a big visual blemish on all formats since that launch version. The Series X in its performance mode does a good job of maintaining a close enough lock to 60 FPS to feel a worthy step up over that 30 FPS quality mode. Some dips with the top third tearing using adaptive VSync do occur in heavy firefights and during traversal, with data streaming being the biggest culprits, and the enhanced AI, combat and pathfinding adding a decent hit to the CPU. Based on prior tests we have done before, the PlayStation 5 tended to traverse and stream better than the Series X, and this is likely true here. With the testing on the PS5 moving through the world on this 2.0 update in its performance mode, we see some dips and the same adaptive tearing with fast riding, but it maintains performance in the upper 50s and still feels good even without a VRR screen, but both consoles would likely feel perfect with a VRR screen in the performance mode. Using heavy firefights in Phantom Liberty on the Series X, I got a rare low of 49 FPS, but even with this worst case scenario, the majority of the battle remains in the mid-50s and averages out to 57 FPS, reinforcing that the performance modes, nips and tucks are all well balanced to deliver equally solid frame rates with these enhancements to the engine.
Fucking fuck! Fire!
Behind! Take it from behind!
All right.
The quality mode is pretty much perfect on both. Just like the prior versions, I found no dips or tearing in this mode from my tests, and the same sections that could present problems before now play through with no issues at all. Dense areas of NPCs, high geometric load, added ray trace shadows on top leave Series X with a locked and smooth 30 FPS readout. Heavy battles, travel and more does not present any issues. Aligned with the superior visual quality and increased image quality, it's still a hard mode to ignore, and for those that hate any performance deviations, this is still the best mode as it locks to that target with no issues present. The PlayStation 5 in the same mode, using the increased AI and combat in the middle of Night City, also presents a locked and stable 30 FPS presentation, and just like the Series X, can be the mode to choose if the increased visual quality and resolution is the most important aspect, as it never struggles in combat or travel, making it the most consistent mode in image quality and frame rate.
You wanna play rough? I'll show you rough!
Now the Series S in its performance mode is not as consistent, even with those detailed reductions. It still dips and tears like the Series X and PlayStation 5, just more often. Walking through a heavily populated hive, we can see the mid-40s are frequently hit, and this is likely a mixture of CPU and bandwidth issues on the S. In firefights, the same lows can be reached, and it can feel choppy at times when it does. A VRR screen would help, and unlike the Series X and PlayStation 5, I would say it makes a big difference on the S due to the lower rates it can hit during these heavier moments. Some sections show clear GPU demands, as here with the high 40s hit at worst, and even though we dipped to that counted low of 635p, it's still not enough for the S to maintain a closer lock on 60 FPS. It must be noted that in the majority of play though, cutscenes, conversations and exploration, it is at a locked 60 or close to it, and therefore it feels much smoother for it over that quality mode, which is identical to the other two, with it offering a fully locked 30 FPS aside a single dip on auto saves, which can happen on all machines including PC. This mode is the best, and for Series S players, it's the mode I would recommend as it offers significantly better image quality at times, far more consistent frame rates, and even has minor but improved visual quality. And in a game such as Cyberpunk, which can look stunning and atmospheric at times due to such a rich steampunk art style to draw from, the impact in this performance mode can leave a bad impression, and as such, quality mode is my recommended choice for S players without exception. Now, the game itself and its ray tracing is built around the PC platform, and specifically the Nvidia GPU, and as such this is where the updates that have come for this game shine the brightest, and we see the same results here, so long as you have the required high-end hardware. And with my RTX 3080 and 5800X 3D machine, I can turn all the dials up to max without DLS3, but I can use the new 3.5 ray reconstruction, which is supported on all RTX GPUs. As before, AMD players have a terrible ray tracing experience with the entire game, and engine being designed around the NVIDIA architecture. This is not a game to show off the AMD GPU, and it's not a surprise at all. The ray reconstruction does increase performance, with it offering slightly better performance in path tracing mode with it on over the Psycho ray tracing mode with it off on my RTX 3080. So ensure you have it enabled if you can, as you can gain upwards of 15% at times. Even in ultra level ray tracing mode, the PC version is significantly more impactful than the Series X and PlayStation 5. Largely due to the way light is calculated and bounced around the scene. The path trace mode is the real showcase here though, with light and occlusion now being dramatically more accurate, as this shot here with global illumination perfectly demonstrates how light is bouncing up and illuminating the concrete sections underneath, and then attenuating out the further inside you look, with the NPCs and pipes and stands all occluded and shaded far more realistically, with less light hitting them. In comparison to the Series X version here with ray tracing on, the NPCs and stands almost glow and light still leaks through objects, and although ambient occlusion is much better, it's quite heavy-handed at places and in general looks far more game-like in comparison to the PC maxed out. The game remains a showcase for great art and superb lighting quality throughout, and although the models and textures are not up to the same standard as big AAA games such as Horizon, Spider-Man, The Last of Us or Red Dead Redemption 2, the technical quality and bleeding edge ray tracing on use here is true poster boy for the high-end PC market. As you would expect, all this beauty comes at a cost, and even on my RTX 3080 at 1440p DLSS performance, so internally fixed at 720p, we are often in the 30s here. Somewhere between 40 and 50 is a playable experience and possible for sure. It's better with a controller at these rates, but a mouse is still possible if not recommended. Dropping to ultra performance has too large an impact on IQ, and this does not achieve 60 FPS anyway. Pushing to a 1080p base back to 4K, again using DLSS 2, this brings my machine into single digits and 100 millisecond plus frame times. And it's simply unplayable, but the choice is yours to turn these forward looking features on or off, and if so, then 120 FPS or more is possible. Be aware though that CPU demands have increased here with this update, and the game can max out a single or dual core much sooner than before, leaving many cores unused, and this is due to the improved AI in the game from police, NPCs and combat, and this can cause some of the dips on console and even here on my 5800X 3D CPU, but at higher resolutions and settings it can also become memory bound through those PCIe lanes and SSD streaming, which is now a baseline requirement for PC after this update. Again, ray tracing just impacts that even further due to the BVH traversal and building of data. Lower machines than this still need a 1080p DLSS performance target at 30 FPS or some cutbacks in other FX to achieve 30 or 40 FPS range, and if you sport a newer 4000 card then DLSS 3 can help boost this more, but really this only works at 60 FPS upwards, so it's not a silver bullet for all those owners. The PC is the best place to play this title though, as you have the option, and if you have the hardware, to pick and choose within that specification, and if you do, the results can be groundbreaking. Literally. The update has been a long time in the making, and it is superb for both console and PC players alike. None of the issues from launch are present here, but those that have Nvidia hardware get much more from this title, with it being a showcase for high quality path trace lighting, even if the demands are high. Working in conjunction with Nvidia specifically, these benefits are obvious throughout, and it certainly leverages the Nvidia hardware better than any other game I've tested. PlayStation 5 and Series X certainly get the lion's share of the quality visuals and expansion this offers, and the dual modes generally offer a compelling and real choice to make, with them dipping and tearing infrequently enough, but still offering a solid 60 FPS level, and the quality mode is the most stable, with only a handful of drops and torn frames spotted. Even the Series S offers up a great but sacrificed version of this big title. Performance mode can work in quiet sections and maybe more on a VRR screen, but in reality the tearing and dips in many of the bigger set pieces can be distracting alongside the huge hit to visual quality. With the quality mode being good enough to deliver a solid 30 FPS and closer image quality to the bigger consoles in their performance mode, the fact the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X miss out on this update is a bit of a shame, but those CPU demands would likely have been a step too far, as this can even stress my 5800X 3D at times, and that is by no means a slow CPU. The loading is another nice boost, with them really using the PS5 and PCs now, with this presenting one of the bigger gaps between Series X and S and PS5 and PC that I've seen, and wraps up an impressive, if somewhat pedestrian DLC with its story, cringy dialogue often, and structure. It does at least offer up some good set pieces, battles, and extension to the world and story and lore, and certainly some of the best visuals both on consoles and PC of 2023. Just be aware of the increased demands on hardware, and at least during our review time, this also forces PC and console to be online to access the game, something I hope is removed once it goes live to the public later today. And that's it for another deep dive into consoles, performance, and all things ray tracing and Cyberpunk related. Remember, if you like what we do here on IGN Performance Reviews, keep it IGN, and we'll catch you on the next one.